All right. Hello and welcome to this conversation on joy and attunement with God. My name is Meryl Herr, and I serve as the Director of Research and Resources at the Max Dupree Center for Leadership at Fuller Seminary. In our work at the Dupree Center, we create research-backed resources to help you work and lead in a distinctively Christian way. This conversation today is part of our Cultivating Joy project. In early 2024, we conducted 25 interviews with executive level leaders who are Christians to understand how they experience joy in the context of their work. Today, we're going to discuss one of the emerging findings from the data with two experts, Tracy Matthews and Laura Murray. Tracy is the founder of Attune to Grow, where she cultivates spiritually attuned leadership within an array of inspiring organizations. Attune offers tools and training to help teams slow down, listen deeply, and tap into more of God's guidance for the decision-making, strategic direction setting, and team building of organizational leadership. Prior to launching Attune, Tracy led strategy and business development for Cascada Incorporated, an early-stage industrial biotech company, and she's also held positions at McKinsey & Company and the Kimberly-Clark Corporation. She holds a bachelor's degree in engineering from the University of Washington and an MBA from the Harvard Business School. Tracy, thanks so much for being here today. And we're also joined by Laura Murray. Laura is the Director of Spiritual Engagement and Innovation at Fuller Seminary's Center for Spiritual Formation. She is an ordained pastor, author, facilitator, and a certified spiritual director. For 20 years, she has worked with individuals and groups in the areas of leadership development and spiritual formation. She's previously served as a pastor of spiritual formation at Highland Park Presbyterian Church in the Dallas area, and her most recent creative endeavor is the design and development of digital silent retreats, bringing faith formation into the digital space. Laura has a master's degree in theology and recently completed her Doctor of Ministry degree. She's also working on her first book, which will be published with InterVarsity Press. Laura, welcome to you too. Thanks for being here. So I've invited Laura and Tracy to talk with me today about the connection between joy and one's sense of attunement with God. So I've sent them some questions to prime their thinking, and we're going to get started with the first. And Laura, we'll start with you. How would you define joy?
Thanks, Meryl, for having us, and just looking forward to the conversation. I loved getting these questions ahead of time to be able to process them. And so my working definition, I'm going to call it the working definition, is that it is a deep satisfaction and bright delight that we get to share with others, and it includes elements outside of ourselves.
Mm. Say more about that, elements outside of ourselves. What do you mean by that?
I added that yesterday. I'd written out the definition a few days ago, and then I added the other one because I think joy requires that there are things outside of ourselves that to be able to cultivate it, to be able to have it, whether it's people, whether it's something that God is doing. I almost see joy as an indirect type thing. And so it requires things outside of ourselves in order to receive it, whether it's people and whether it's God, like I said, whether it's beauty, whether it's other factors. It's not one of those things that we can muster up ourselves or do on our own or go after. I think we can cultivate. And that's why I love later on when you use the word cultivate, like we can cultivate spaces, we can cultivate things. And so, yeah, I think we need elements outside of ourselves to help us cultivate it.
Really cool. Tracy, what would you say? How would you define joy?
I love what Laura just said, including the cultivate. That really resonated when you said that as well. So I would say, I would call it like it's first like one of the fruit of the spirit. So it's part of love, and the part of love associated with kind of perceiving and experiencing the good and the true and the beautiful. And I do think that so much of it is, perceived certainly within us, but so much of it is outside of us. So I love what you said there, Laura, about the external aspects of joy. That's a key part of it.
Okay, so we've defined joy. What does it feel like to you? And you can talk
Mhm.
about the bodily sensations. You could reference a book, a song, a movie, a scene. In our interviews, someone said joy feels like butterflies everywhere, and someone said it's that scene from Sound of Music when Maria is twirling on the fields in the Alps. So what does joy feel like to each of you? Tracy, we'll start with you this time.
Sure. So I'm going to answer in kind of two parts. The first, like, what does it feel like in like snippets? I'm like, ooh, like really good chocolate with like toffee bits. Or like when my mom used to make me like a rice porridge when I wasn't feeling well. Or like moments of dancing. Stuff like that. Stuff like that for me feels like joy. But I decided I've actually for a while been interested in like the hormones associated with attunement, but with joy, they're kind of go together. But they're like the happy hormones, like there's even a name for it. So it's things like oxytocin. So associate like the love hormone, like deep connection and care. So moments of deep connection
Mhm.
and care are experiences of joy. Things like serotonin, like associated with well-being, things that
Mhm.
where you feel like things are good, shalom, that those are associated with joy. Things like endorphins, right? Which, exercise, but like a good laugh.
Mhm.
These are things that are associated with joy. The dopamine, so like most often associated with like achievement or accomplishment. There's so much of like these moments of joy, especially when we talk about our daily work, where
Mhm.
there's joy when you get whatever gives you that sense of good, like well done, good and faithful servant. So I would say
Mhm.
that the experience of it,
Mhm.
those hormonal aspects of it, I think make them more relatable and actually actionable.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
really fascinating to hear you talk about the hormones. I haven't read any research on that, the hormone connections with joy. I'm gonna have to go back and dig and see what is there. But it's amazing how what you have said corresponds to what we would call the antecedents of joy that we saw in our research. So we asked people to talk about something good that they had experienced and then the emotions that
Mhm.
came with that and looked at, well, what was the good thing that actually triggered the experience of joy? And goal attainment was number one on the list,
Mm,
right? And so you that came up in your list.
dopamine.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, it feels great, right? Or feeling success, like, oh, this is a big win for us and our team, or making a difference, right? That like kind of like there's like a different kind of feel good emotion that comes with that. People describe that as feeling joy. But there was also a very relational aspect of
Mhm.
it as well. So that's really
Mhm.
interesting. I'll be eager to look into that a bit more. Laura, what about
Mhm.
for you? How would you describe the feeling of joy?
I would describe it as the deep sense of satisfaction after a really good workout. And I think this connects to what a lot of what Tracy said, but also that good and faithful servant piece, that with joy, that there is some type of journey to get there. Yes, it can absolutely be a gift and we can receive joy and experience joy. For me, though, and this may be my Enneagram 4 showing, that it is, you have just walked through something challenging, worthy, strenuous, and that you're on the other side of it. And it's that sense of like, like just to be able to sit in the satisfaction. So it definitely, I think maybe just for the way I'm wired, just of achievement, and it might be different for how different people are wired. We were talking about this actually, my husband and my daughter and I know that my daughter is not an executive leader, but I was curious about her, how she described it. And she said a burst of energy and the urge to keep going.
Mm.
And I caught on to that last one of the urge to keep going. And I thought, yes, like there is this generative thing about joy. And it reminded me of the scripture in Hebrews of talking about Jesus and the joy that was set before him, right? That there is a purpose, there is there is some people, there is a good work in that way, like joy is outside of us. But anyways, but you're going back to your feeling question. Like for me, it's that deep satisfaction, and it's other things too. It's also slowing down. So on the opposite side of achievement, right? It's slowing down. And when I noticed the beauty of flowers, considering like the work that it took for that and who was involved in that, and then appreciation. And so gratitude. And so it's almost like this, sometimes it's a little bit like an out of body experience that comes after we kind of do the work of looking for joy or do the work of walking through something hard. So
Yeah,
I
I
don't know if
resonate with
anything.
that idea of like that, to perceive and truly experience it. Like we kind of have to stop moving in some ways, right? So that the whole like taking some like it brings me back to the creation story, and God made stuff and then he sat back and said, this is good. So there's that aspect of being able to kind of step back and see and perceive and experience the good. You can have all those endorphins and kind of feel it, but the awareness of it
Yeah.
leads to the actual kind of deeply felt sensations.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We've seen that in the research a little bit. We noticed that some of the folks that we talked to didn't really have a joy vocabulary. So they didn't have the language to put to their experience. They might say happiness, but it's not quite happiness, or so they knew there was some distinguishing feature, but may not always go directly to joy, or couldn't get a sense of how joy felt for them. And that was intriguing to us. But one of those same people that we talked with at the end of the interview said, this was really fascinating just as a process to take time to think about my experiences of joy. And that was instructive to me of the fact that we may not actually stop and slow down enough. We may run past the feelings and not be aware of them, or Tracy, in your language, attuned to what's going on inside of us, in order to go, oh yeah, that was a moment that brought me joy. We just kind of keep going without really naming it joy, naming the experience. We just delight in what it feels like and keep moving.
And I love how that ties into the work of joy. Like cultivating joy implies like we have work to do. And there's so much of like a biblical command to joy, like rejoice in all circumstances kind of thing. So like this, this whole ability to slow down and take a step back and perceive, like there are steps we can take. We're meant to take. We're actually called to take, to cultivate joy. And yes, of course, as a fruit of the Spirit, it kind of leads to more of love, more of God, more flow of life, getting back to that generative comment that I made.
So in our project, we asked folks, so we asked them, what does joy feel like? We asked them to talk about a time that was good at work and whether or not that, helped them feel joy. But then we said, well, what does it feel like to be attuned with God in the course of your work, or attuned to God in the course of your work? And then we said, well, what does that feel like? And how does that relate to joy? So I want to bring us to the attunement to God part of the conversation a little bit. And let's just start by asking, what does it mean to be attuned to God? Tracy, we'll start with you. It's in the name of your business. So we'll just go there first, and then we'll come to Laura.
Yeah, so we define spiritual attunement to God, as like just an intentional process to tap into God's presence and guidance, and then align our response with it. And key to that is kind of getting in touch with God's heart towards us and our whatever our context is, and aiming to kind of conform to his likeness, share in that heart. So it's that perceiving of God's presence and guidance and aligning our response with it. Like that's how.
Laura, what about for you?
Yeah, a lot of it is what Tracy just said, this sense of awareness, slowing down, giving space. I and I think a lot of us often think we need to make things happen, or we need to produce something, or that is very much in at least the Western culture to do that. And so the attunement is to pause before all that, to pause and to say, okay, God, what are you saying or speaking? What are you inviting me to today? And what happens, is often a more creative work and often a more joyful work. And when we pause to attune, at least I've noticed that in my life. So I really have to surrender my achiever, my producer. And it's so hard because in our world, achieving and producing is, that's what gets you raises. That's what takes you up the ladder. That's what all those things. And God's like, no, like stay connected to me, stay attuned, stay aware. And I think the practice of pausing, awareness, and slowing down, that like regular, like small practices each day allow you to actually be able to notice it in the middle of something. So often, whether it's centering prayer or examine or whatever it is, what that cultivates is the ability to be attuned to God throughout the day rather than just for 10 minutes when you were practicing it. And it brings so much more freedom. It brings creativity, like I said earlier, it brings joy, it decreases anxiousness, but it requires surrender. I mean, that's part of the work, is that surrender. So yeah, just to be able to hear God's voice, not just in that few moments. So that attunement is being able to hear God's voice, but also throughout the day and throughout the work, so that your practice of pausing can actually be practiced throughout the day and be like, oh, pause for a second. Okay, God, what are you saying? What's happening in the room? What's happening in me? So that you can respond to it.
Yes, and amen. And we will at Attune will often talk about it as like really a set of like muscles, movements, postures before God. And we totally agree with exactly what Laura said. Like, hey, we do some intentional practicing with it. It's like some working out to build the muscles, which is good in its own right. But then throughout the day, and it just becomes the way we can move in the world. And this kind of that whole prayer without ceasing idea is not that we're verbally saying things to God all the time, but that we're just in this constant loop of, listening, hearing, like, and aligning, like, and that's kind of just becomes how we can go about our days.
So Laura, you've already hinted about how that might relate to experiencing joy, being attuned with God. In your experience, at least, helps the work to be more joyful. I'm curious, what would both of you say about the connection between our attunement with God and our ability to experience joy?
I can start.
Go for it. I have mine are kind of swirling, so go for it.
Yeah, and we can dialogue, definitely. What I said about the hormones associated with joy, is stemming out of like the initial curiosity around like the hormones associated with attunement. The idea that fullness of joy is found in God's presence is so true. So when we experience God's heart's posture for us, his guidance. So yes, he gives us guidance to help us do more meaningful work in more effective kingdom-oriented building ways, which kind of feeds into some of the dopamine, but the relational connectivity, like when we experience how much he loves us, like joy is like a natural, you don't have to cultivate that. It just comes from it because God is so good. And like we work with a lot of people who come to us because they want to do their work better, which is beautiful. Like God wants to help us do our work better. But he mostly wants to call us further into him through attunement because he loves us and it's just better. He wants more joy for us. Like it's so attractive of a proposition, not like a should do or like so you can do more work for God, but because fullness of joy is found in God's presence and it's its own work of transformation that just frees us up to more joy. So I would say they are highly intertwined.
I love, Tracy, just the the pulling back and the receiving of God rather than just our pursuit of God, and the receiving of what God has to say about us. That informs how we see ourselves, how we see others, and how, like, I think we're all that's kind of the work, is to be able to hear what God has to say. I think Henry Nouwen talks about the work of prayer is to be quiet enough to be able to hear the good things that God has to say about us, and to receive that. And I think for me, the attunement allows God to meet me, and also for me to do the work of speaking what's really going on. So again, being able to say, I'm nervous about this, or I'm struggling with this, or this is really hurtful and I'm still carrying it in my day. So for me, the attunement of God is hearing the good things and also allowing him to heal anything that needs to be healed, to speak, to know his presence, to receive his peace, to receive all those things that we need in order to then to be able to do things with true joy, rich joy, authentic joy, not a joy that we kind of mustered up and is fake. And so I think for me, attunement with God means being healed by God, and then being healed by God so that I can more authentically bring the joy that he gives me because I've walked through that valley with him, or walked through that. I think attunement with God also helps me to practice gratitude more, to be able to practice thankfulness more. And that takes me out of myself, which is really important. It takes me out of my own head, allows me to see, gives me a bigger picture. And so then that invites me to like a greater joy, like the bigger picture joy of this world and of creation. And so the specific way of healing and meeting me, but also the gratitude that allows me to go bigger. For a couple of years, and I know I'm getting into spiritual practices, but for a couple of years, I practiced this examen that ended up being the three G's, right? Like a good preacher would come up with the three G's, right? So every day I would practice gratitude, whether large or small, some type of gratitude. I would name anything that I'm grieving, large or small, repeated, whatever. And then I would consider what ways God is inviting me to be generous in that day. And so those three just regularly practice help me to stay attuned to God and help me to stay aware. And interestingly enough, that generosity one, the third one, I often found that it was a practice that I needed to give myself. So like to be generous with myself. And I found with others that often the generosity is actually the generosity that they receive for themselves. And so I think there's a link as well towards, and maybe back to what Tracy was saying, of receiving grace, receiving generosity, that then cultivates this place where over time that joy becomes an overflowing posture, if that makes sense. Like it's something that kind of starts to automatically come out because it's been produced in this fruit that overflows. So
Can I tell a
yeah.
story? A personal story. So related to some of the things Laura just touched on. I'm specifically thinking of a particular moment where I brought something to God who showed me some stuff. But related to some of what she said about it helps me kind of understand what's going on within me, helps God to do that healing, helps me to receive God's amazing graciousness. So, and I'll just preface this by saying, at Attune, we do a lot of right-brained or creative modes of attunement. So a lot of visualization, a lot of metaphor, body-based awareness. So if it sounds kind of wacky, it's all good. Don't worry. But it's good. You'll see it. We say test everything. You'll know it by its fruit. So I brought to God a situation where there was friction between me and another person, some resistance. And of course, I thought it was all their problem. So I brought it to God, and I forget the exercise we used, but I think through some body-based awareness, the imagery that came for me was I wanted to like, it sounds terrible, but kind of like, I felt like a donkey who wanted to like kick him away. Like that was the imagery that came, like basically God is showing me like I'm being a donkey. I mean, that wasn't the word that I used, but like I'm being a donkey. And I feel so I'm flooded with a sense of shame at that point. But the next move in the exercise is to like just bring yourself before Jesus. So I come to Jesus as this like full of shame, long-faced donkey. And he, before I can even look up to see him, it's like I'm coming up to him and he like puts his hand over, I don't know, my snout, what muzzle, I don't know what you call the face of my face, and all the way over my body and transforms me from a donkey into like a shimmery, I don't know, mermaid siren kind of thing. Like the message was like, and I delight in you, and I see you with such, I mean, it was like a supernatural glow, like in cartoons. Like that's how I see you. And yeah, like stop acting like a donkey. That's not helpful. But the awareness it brought and God's graciousness. Like, hey, this is who I made you to be. This is who you are. This is how I see you. And the shame goes away. And I'm able to like move into that situation, not full of shame, but fully aware of my donkey-like tendencies and ready to repent, go a different way.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful image of, the real connection, deep connection we can have with Jesus in those moments of surrender, bringing that shame to him. Oh, I have so many follow-up questions for you both. Tracy, do you want to say anything else, or Laura, about just attunement to God and what that looks like in everyday life, how it relates to joy?
I'll say one more thing on the cultivating side. So like the attunement, so you should usually like as I'm going about my daily work, a lot of times I'm bringing things before God, and sometimes he does this deeper inner work, which is very much used. Sometimes he's just kind of showing me stuff about the future, but the idea of like the habituation, the cultivation of this connection with God, kind of, I mean, if you're into like neuroscience, the neural pathways of joy just become very well developed and much easier for the world around you to trigger. So you just get to experience joy that much. It's like a practice thing, but it kind of comes through attunement. That's been my experience.
So here's a question that I had, looking at the data, because we've got several people who are talking about their union with Christ and their just overwhelming sense of the presence of God with them in their work, their deep trust in God's goodness, that God has a plan. We're seeing that a lot in the data, and those that sort of attunement to God that they're experiencing helps them move to places of joy and hope when they're in a challenging situation. But here is my question that I'm trying to figure out. I'm still looking at the data. Are we going after joy? Like, is that our goal? Do we cognitively know, or excuse me, consciously know that we're going after pursuing joy? Or are we pursuing something else? Are we pursuing life with God? Maybe we know it comes with joy, and joy is just the byproduct of it. Does that make sense? The difference there?
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Do you have any insight?
So this is where what Tracy said earlier is helpful, that joy is a fruit of the Spirit. And so it is a fruit that comes about by the Spirit. So we can long for it, we can ask for it, we can desire it, but our work is to cultivate the ground for it. And it is, I think it is a byproduct. I also think it's a gift. I also think that it can just be given by us doing nothing at all if God so chooses to do that for us. But I do think there is a work that is involved, and it's, and that like anything else in our spiritual practices, we don't really know how it works. It's like when you go to work out you're like, I know I'm doing these exercises. I know I'm building the muscle, and we can probably look at science to see what exactly is happening and all that. But a lot of it's mysterious as well. Right. And a lot of it is very personal of how you build your muscles and what food you bring in and how you're designed. And so I think in these things is just to go, okay, what is mine to do and what is God's to do? And I think that the gift and the byproduct and the fruit of joy is God's to give. And that we can cultivate the space for it. We can help create these pathways that bring it into our lives far more easier. So I do think it's an elusive type thing. Like it's elusive in the sense if we try to run after it. Or you can get what we may think is joy, but it's very temporary. And so I would say that lasting sense of joy is really what God cultivates, in us. And I think also going back to understanding the spiritual practices, a lot of people will ask like, okay, what can I do so that I have this result from a spiritual practice? And I'll often say, okay, yes, there are fruit. There are often these types of fruit that develop from these types of practices. We've just seen that. But a spiritual practice or attunement with God, it's for the sake of being attuned to God. Like it's for the sake of relationship. It's for the sake of connectivity. And the second we turn it or we rely more on its utilitarian value, then like we've made God into something we use rather than somebody we're with. And I think that's the thing that often that those things, and me too, I mean, we all get it kind of mixed up, like, okay, don't use God, don't use people, don't use, these are relationships and these are gifts. And so that's how I would respond.
I would double down on that. And the idea of like attunement to God brings all the fruit of the Spirit. Like it is a natural outflow of. But I would just add this one element of like, and it is helpful to kind of tease it apart. And because if you're cultivating joy, it helps you cultivate attunement to God. So like, the whole idea of perceiving and experiencing the good, like the things that help you do that, like the pausing, taking a step back, gratitude, naming what is good. These are things that will cultivate joy, but they're going to be part and parcel of what cultivates attunement to God. So I do agree with it really is all about experiencing the with God life. But there are like, just in God's goodness, there are just endless dimensions and ways to live further into it.
Yeah.
And joy is one of those pathways.
So it sounds like, just to recap, that on one hand, the Christian life is pursuing deeper union with Christ. And from that, the fruit of, surrendering to the Spirit, being filled with the Spirit, is a life that includes increasing joy among the other fruit. And that it could be a good gift when God surprises us with joy. I think of Surprised by Joy, the C.S. Lewis book. But at the same time, we can cultivate our awareness and appreciation, delight in the good things that are in this world, and in our attributing them to God and going back to God, and that is reinforcing our attunement with God, and like just helping to deepen. I was trying to say increase and deepen at the same time. Increase and deepen that union that we experience.
Well said.
Yeah. Well said. Well summarized. I do want to add that there is still, because this is a lot of my work, so like personal work, is that attunement to God also means attunement to the heart of God for others. And I know we're talking about a lot of like what's going on inside of us. And I don't want to miss that joy includes what's going on inside of others and what's going on in people's lives and other people's lives, and what we need to do for others. And again, just because this is fresh on my mind, my daughter and I watched Inside Out 2 yesterday, and then we were talking about things, and I said, hey, I'm having a joy conversation tomorrow. Like, here are the questions. And we sat around the dinner table and we were talking about all these things. And she said, Mom, it brings me joy when I pray for others. And I thought, okay, what being attuned to God enough to get outside of my own world, to be able to be attuned to God's heart for others, and that serving others. So that serving others is a way that I receive joy, getting out of my head, getting out of my heart, getting out of my interior world and getting into the world of others, and the world that God is in as well, is another way of being attuned to God. So I wanted to mention that, not that I don't, like, I value everything we talked about, just to say there's an attunement outside of ourselves that we need to be aware of, that also is a part of our joy as well. And especially as we share that joy with others, and that we include others in that joy, and they, just that we include it as people.
And if you want to do that, kind of, what are the things that stir up those happy hormones that we've talked about? Relational connectivity with others shows up in everyone. So yes, yes, and amen to what you said.
So we've already talked about some practices a little bit. The reason we're going to talk about practices now, more specifically, is because one of the pieces of this Cultivating Joy project is to identify some practices that can help people begin to cultivate joy in their lives, whether that's through pursuing attunement with God, or, like we talked about, cultivating more awareness of the good things in our life, and the positive appraisals that we bring to those. So I'm curious, you both think you work with a lot of different leaders in a lot of different contexts. This particular study, we looked at executives. Obviously, in our work at the Dupree Center, we extend our work to a whole gamut of leaders, from people that are working in city government to the federal government to higher education, K-12 education, business leaders, nonprofit leaders, middle managers. We have so many people that we are serving. But these folks are busy, like we all are, right? They have full days, they have responsibilities outside of work. What are some basic practices that they can begin to adopt to cultivate attunement with God and or cultivate joy? I know, Laura, you've already given us the examine, which is great. But I'm curious, just what comes top of mind to you as just an easy way to get started for someone?
I might start with 2-minute pauses that you pepper throughout your day, where it's at least the way that I would tend to approach it would be something that helps you become present. So like we'll do a lot of engaging the physical senses, like, sight, hearing, sound. What do I feel? Am I feeling my feet on the ground? Am I hearing? What am I smelling? Just because there's an understanding the way God has built us, that when we kind of engage our senses in this perceiving mode, it quiets our own proactive mind, which is key if we want to actually hear from God. So something that helps you get present and aware, right? Those awareness muscles, perceiving muscles, requires kind of quieting the proactive mind. And then like listening, like a dialogue with God. Just it might start with, okay, perceiving through physical senses. It might be as simple as, okay, what am I feeling? God, what do you want me to notice? What might you want to say to that? And that can be, it can be as simple as that. And if you just start to learn to recognize which voice is God's, right? Because you'll start to hear things that as you start to kind of live them out, they'll be confirmed or not. Like, oh, that was just indigestion, or my own voice, or the enemy's, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that simple part, become present in a perceiving, and then just ask God what he wants you to notice.
That's really good. We did hear that mindfulness came up for several folks. Being mindful to what was going on in the present was a pathway for them to experience joy in their work. So I really love that, and the step beyond that you've given us to invite God into that dialogue. So thanks.
Yeah.
Really
I
good.
love those practices. And I want to give maybe some frame to like to a couple of things. One is that like if they take a 2-minute pause, you know, for awareness, or maybe even a 5-minute like a 5-minute pause at the beginning of the day, middle of the day, end of the day, of centering prayer,
Mm.
or breath prayer, just because it helps them center on, it helps them bring in the distractions. It helps them to center their mind a little bit, because their minds are going really fast. Our minds, you know, you wake up, you get going. Middle of the day, it seems like an interruption, but it's just helpful for actually recentering you for the rest of the day. And since centering prayer is a prayer where you are not talking, but you recenter yourself on a truth about who God is, or an invitation that you're sensing from God. You don't have to figure things out. You don't have to analyze it. It's literally a way of taking 5 minutes to then take your distractions and recenter them on who God is. And that is one way. And in that, what comes up is awareness of how busy your mind is, or awareness of like what your body's doing. Like that, you just have a lot of awareness. You can do the same thing in the breath prayer form, not spoken, but of focusing on your breath when you get distracted in that 5-minute time. And so when you focus on your breath, and then often it allows you to actually move into deep breathing, which is really good for the body. And so I wanted to give a little bit, like, it's kind of like tangent, like alongside of what Tracy just said. And the other thing that people always get mad at me when I say this practice is to literally slow down. Like to literally slow down their eating, to literally slow down their walking pace, to, again, I'm saying literally because I literally mean slow down your speaking. I say anything, that's often one of the first things I start with. And people get so mad. They're like, you want me to do what? I'm like, yeah, just slow it down. And it's such an interruption to the way that they've been moving, because our minds can do a lot of things, our hearts can do a lot of things, but our bodies are really great communicators. And so you're kind of stopping your body, because your body gets into these habits and it's just moving through, or it's just doing whatever. So I think just slowing down your body has a great ripple effect on your mind, on your heart, your attunement. And then when you do slow down your body, you're more at ease, you're more receptive to what's around you. You can see, you can notice, you can hear, you can smell. And so a little bit of again, alongside of what Tracy just said, of that mindfulness piece too, Meryl, or that awareness piece, like if they don't slow down for it, like it can't happen.
And I just want to bridge off what Laura just said, and the body-based awareness. Like our bodies really can communicate so much, and inviting God into this, like an exercise we'll do, we call listening with the body, which is like, hey, God, what do you want me to notice in what I'm feeling in my physical body? And is there an invitation you have for me, right? Like so often we're unaware that our stomach is churning, our chest is super tight, or like there's like an all being driven into the back of my head. Like, hey, your body is telling you something, and ask God to help you interpret it. And there's just so much awareness, and it kind of bridges into some of this more right brain stuff. So body-based awareness is super affected. The other thing I would encourage people to try stuff out is with visual imagery, like art or pictures. You know, I'll usually have like a stack of image cards on my desk that just helps with like I have a sense of either how I'm feeling or what I'm perceiving in the other person or the situation of what God might be speaking. But to surface from that kind of right brain, subconscious heart level awareness, having visual imagery can help you bring it into conscious awareness. Like a Visio Divina, or even just like, I'm just going to flip through some images. I'm going to look for what's resonating. Usually it's a physical or emotional resonance. And then I'm just going to ask God to show me more like what that's about.
That's really good. That's really good. I wanted to circle back to two things that came up Laura, one of them, I think, and Tracy, you two, talking about the pause, the slowing down. I preface that by saying people move fast in their work, right? We're busy folks. We have a lot of demands on our plate. And the people that you are caring for through your work, both of you, what would you say are some of the primary obstacles to attunement with God and experiencing joy?
I would say one of the primary things is that they believe that if they don't take care of it, nobody else will. So it's this sense that, responsibility, which is a good thing, drives them, right? Integrity is driving them. But often it's this, they assume that they have to pick it up, which is really, it can be based in a lot of things, but often it's based in the fear of failing, the fear of disappointing, wanting to people please. And so in that, like, if you pull back that layer, you're like, okay, can we be attuned to God so that you hear God's voice of goodness and delight and pleasure in you, so that that drive to respond, react, solve, because a lot of them are really tired from over functioning. So that's one, I would say.
Totally. And I would just, again, double down on something Laura said, is like the discomfort of slowing down. Like hey, it's actually gonna feel wrong because it's very countercultural to the world around you that you're experiencing, and also countercultural to what got you to where you are as a leader. So it's like, it feels wrong. And that wrong takes a whole bunch of different flavors, but kind of like getting people past the point, well, getting them to attune to God, at least for a moment, in a way that invites them into, like, this is a good thing to slow down, so that they can claim it as like a pleasing act of obedience and sacrifice to actually slow down. Like it's pleasing to God. As an Enneagram 3, you get the gold star by saying no to these other things you think you're supposed to get done and do. So it's the slowing down piece, and just the stomach to like press through it. I mean, it literally feels like dying, right? It's the dying to self spiritual journey. So to kind of pressing through the discomfort of the slowing down.
That's a good word, Tracy, the highlighting of the discomfort. It will be uncomfortable. You will have resistance, expect it, and that's part of it. Just like anything else that you would want to grow in, a muscle or, learning, like, it's uncomfortable, you're unsure of yourself. It's, but what you highlighted of what was working and got you to where you are now is no longer going to work. I think that's a lot of times we all hit that in leadership of, oh, that served me for a while, but it's not going to serve me anymore. And I would say my own experience is that to cultivate joy is a challenge, because there's so much coming at people in leadership, whether it's solutions, whether it's crises, whether it's anxiousness about the world, whether it's family things. There's all these things that can really, like, hinder joy. So I think it's something not just cultivating, that there's a fight for it. And even when I say fight for it, it's not us mustering it up. It's like going, like, Jesus is like, I've got this. Like, I've got the joy that you need, and trusting him in the midst of all of the things that we're doing, to go like, okay, he's got joy, and he's got it for me. And I can trust that. I mean, that's part of the work too. And it's really hard because there's so much they're facing.
That's really good. So the other thing I was going to come back to, and we've hit on it just a little bit here, and just talking about the struggle, the difficulty in the surrender. And so, Laura, I'm going all the way back up to the top when you talked about there's like a journey to get to joy. Like there's a challenge, you're going for something worthy, it's strenuous, but then there's like this relief once you get in there. You sighed, you're like, and
Yeah.
that relief language is something we've heard, and people have like, oh, I felt joy and relief simultaneously, right? Like it was this co-current emotion. But does it always require the struggle? Is it a different quality of joy if it's on the other side of struggle, growth, transformation, whatever we want to name it?
I don't know. I'm uncomfortable with like 100% things or, favorites or things like that. So I cannot say that it requires it. Because I do think there are times that God just gives us beautiful and joyful things. And we're just like, we did jack squat, and this is a gift. There are times that people in our lives like just bring us joy and offer us joy. And those are like just really beautiful gifts. I think for us, the work is to make space to be aware of it. Right? Like God could be giving us a gift. God could be bringing people in our lives, and they're huge gifts of joy, and we miss it. I think for me, it just might be how kind of I'm wired. Like I love a challenge. I love to be creative. I love to problem solve and find out new paths for doing things. So that's part of mine. And I think it's more close to our wiring, than it is like this is required.
But bringing it back to that comment on like, hey, we're talking about the spiritual journey towards fullness of life, towards the fruit, cultivating the fruit of the Spirit. So that it kind of does mean it's going to be really hard at times. Like there's going to be like peaks and valleys, like that's the truth, and long flat plains. So I guess I might bridge them with this, they're muscles. Like you're cultivating joy, and a lot of it will have to come through hardship, but when you've got them, it just, you now have that full availability to trigger the joy, I don't know, potential power capabilities you have. Like the other day, I was at an airport and I saw this beautiful goodbye family dynamic. I'll just put it that way. I don't know them at all, but I just started weeping. And it was like a joy kind of weeping, like nothing to do with me, but I think my capacity for joy through a lot of hard work, all empowered by the Spirit, makes it so like even in the very small things, you can experience joy very intensely.
I love that. Well said, Tracy. I love that.
That's really wise. Well, thank you both so much. This has been an absolute delight. So much wisdom and thoughtfulness from your experience, both of you. And I'm challenged and encouraged and inspired to go back and look at the data more, look at some more of the research to see what it says. But I just want to thank you both for your engagement today in this conversation about joy and attunement with God. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
This has been a joy. I mean that.